The room was cold, dark, and silent, except for the heavy breathing of the man sitting in the center. His wrists were chained to the steel table, his ankles locked to the floor. The air smelled of chemicals, metal, and something faintly rotten. Across from him stood three alien figures, their glowing yellow eyes staring at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. They were tall, their thin bodies covered in smooth, silver armor. Behind them, a fourth figure, their leader, stepped forward. He spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. "You are human," the alien leader said. "We have studied your kind. Weak flesh, short lives, too emotional. You are nothing compared to the Dominion." His mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. "You will tell us everything, or you will suffer." The man, identified only as Captain Ryan Cole, lifted his head slowly. His face was bruised, a thin cut ran along his cheek, and his dark hair was damp with sweat. But his green eyes burned with something the aliens did not understand. He was not afraid. He was not begging. He was watching them calmly, as if waiting for something. One of the aliens moved forward, holding a long, needle-like instrument. "Pain breaks all creatures," it said, its voice clicking unnaturally. "You will scream, human." The needle touched his skin, and a burning sensation shot through his arm. It felt like acid was eating him from the inside. His muscles tensed, his jaw clenched, but he did not make a sound. The aliens exchanged glances. The machine hummed louder, increasing the pain. His veins felt like they were on fire. His breathing grew heavier, but still, he did not scream. The alien torturer tilted its head. "Strange," it muttered. "Most beings beg by now." The leader stepped closer, pressing a clawed hand onto Ryan's shoulder. "You will not last forever, human," he whispered. "You will break. All things do." Ryan exhaled, slow and steady. Then, for the first time, he spoke. "You don't understand, do you?" His voice was rough but steady. "You're testing pain. But humans don't just endure pain. We use it." His lips curled into a small, dangerous smile. "We turn it into fuel." The aliens hesitated. They had seen countless prisoners weak, sobbing, pleading for mercy. This was different. This human was not simply resisting. He was waiting. The leader narrowed his glowing eyes. "Enough games." He gestured to his soldiers. "Increase the voltage." A new machine whirred to life. A surge of electricity slammed into Ryan's body. His back arched, muscles straining, teeth gritting. The pain was unbearable, but his mind stayed focused. He had trained for this. He had survived worse. And most importantly, he knew something the aliens didn't. They were afraid. Not of him, not yet, but of what he represented. Aliens had studied humans for years, but they had never truly understood them. They thought humans were fragile, soft creatures, easy to break. But they had never fought on Earth. They had never seen a mother lift a car to save her child, never watched soldiers crawl through fire with missing limbs just to complete a mission, never witnessed how humans evolved under pressure. Every species had limits. Humans? They found limits and then shattered them. Ryan's body trembled as the voltage increased, but instead of crying out, he did something that made the room go silent. He laughed. A low, rough chuckle at first. Then it grew deeper, louder, until it filled the chamber. The aliens stared at him in confusion, in shock, in something close to fear. No prisoner had ever laughed under the machine before. Ryan lifted his head, grinning despite the blood dripping from his lip. "You think this is pain?" he rasped. "You have no idea what real pain is. Real pain is watching your friends die and still fighting. Real pain is knowing you're outnumbered but refusing to surrender. Real pain is losing everything and still standing." He leaned forward, his chains rattling. "You don't understand humans. But you will." The leader's expression darkened. He turned sharply. "Enough," he snapped. "Kill him. He is useless." One of the guards raised a sleek, black weapon, aiming directly at Ryan's forehead. A bright pulse began to charge at the barrel's tip. Ryan remained still. He wasn't afraid of death. He had prepared for this moment. But the aliens had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated him. The second the leader turned his back, Ryan moved. His chains had been worn down from the constant strain of his muscles. With one violent jerk, they snapped. Before the guard could react, Ryan lunged. His hands, though bleeding, wrapped around the alien's throat, twisting hard. A sickening crunch echoed in the room. The alien collapsed. The other two guards jumped back, startled. Too slow. Ryan grabbed the fallen weapon, spun, and fired. A bolt of red energy struck the second guard in the chest, sending it flying into the wall. The third one tried to run. Ryan threw the gun like a spear, hitting it square in the head. The leader turned, eyes wide with shock. Impossible! Ryan wiped the blood from his mouth and smirked. You thought humans were weak. He stepped closer. The leader stumbled back. For the first time in its life, it felt helpless. You're wrong, Ryan continued. We don't break. We don't stop. We don't surrender. He grabbed the leader by the throat and slammed him into the wall. We win. The leader gasped, its claws scratching weakly at Ryan's arm. What are you? What are you? It choked. Ryan leaned in, his voice quiet but deadly. I'm human. The alien's body went limp. Ryan let it drop to the floor. He turned, picking up one of the discarded weapons. There were more guards outside. More enemies. More battles ahead. He rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and smiled to himself. Time to show the universe why humans were the most dangerous species alive. The sky was dead. No stars, no moon, just a black void where Earth used to be. The ashes of humanity drifted through space, silent and forgotten. The Dominion had won. Their warships had burned every city, their soldiers had executed every survivor, and their machines had erased every trace of human civilization. Billions were gone. Billions of voices silenced. The universe moved on, convinced that the human race was nothing more than a memory. But they were wrong. A lone ship drifted in the wreckage of what was once the solar system, its black hull blending into the emptiness. Inside, a single man stood in front of a screen, staring at the cold, hard truth. He was the last. Captain Daniel Reeve had survived the fall of Earth, but survival wasn't enough. He clenched his fists as the faces of his family, his friends, his people flashed in his mind. The Dominion thought the war was over. They had no idea it had just begun. The ship's AI beeped softly, pulling him from his thoughts. Enemy fleet detected. 1 command ship, 6 cruisers, estimated crew, 20,000. Reeve exhaled slowly. It wasn't a battle. It was suicide. And he didn't care. He strapped on his armor, checked his weapons, and set a course straight for the Dominion flagship. The AI hesitated. Captain, this is not a winnable fight. Reeve smirked. It doesn't need to be winnable. The moment he uncloaked, alarms exploded across the Dominion fleet. Enemy ships turned, scanning for the attacker. They expected a fleet, an army, something that made sense. But all they saw was a single human warship, small, damaged, and alone. Confused voices echoed through their comm channels. One ship? Is this a joke? Another voice, more nervous, responded, identify the vessel. Humans are extinct. Reeve activated his weapons. Missiles locked onto their targets, railguns charged, and energy cannons hummed with deadly intent. His voice cut through their frequency like a blade. You should have made sure. The first explosion ripped through the nearest cruiser before the Dominion could react. Shattered metal and bodies spiraled into space as the shockwave rocked the surrounding ships. Before the dust settled, Reeve was already moving, dodging incoming fire with impossible precision. His ship wasn't the fastest, nor the strongest, but it was human-made. And that meant it was built for war. Lasers sliced through the dark, missing him by inches. He weaved through the chaos, unleashing hell with every pass. A second cruiser went up in flames, its core rupturing in a blinding blast. Panic spread through the fleet. This wasn't supposed to be happening. Humans weren't supposed to be here. Inside the Dominion flagship, Supreme Commander Vorkal watched the battle unfold, his four eyes narrowing. He had personally led the attack on Earth, had stood on human soil as their last cities fell. There was no chance of survival. No one had escaped. And yet, here was a human ship, tearing through his fleet like a demon from the void. He turned to his officers, voice sharp. "Destroy that ship! Now!" The remaining cruisers regrouped, surrounding Reeve from all sides. Heavy cannons charged, missiles locked on, the full power of the Dominion aimed at a single man. Reeve gritted his teeth. "All right, let's see if you can keep up." He slammed the controls forward, pushing his ship to its limit. Engines screamed, metal groaned, but he didn't stop. He twisted through the firestorm, dodging with split-second precision. A missile clipped his wing, sending sparks flying, but he barely flinched. Pain meant nothing. Fear meant nothing. Only the mission mattered. He fired again. Another cruiser erupted into debris. The Dominion's formation broke, commanders shouting orders, scrambling to regain control. But it was too late. Reeve was already diving towards the flagship, full speed ahead. Vorkal stared at the screen, disbelief turning to something else, fear. This wasn't just a human soldier. This was vengeance given form. He barked a desperate command. "All batteries, focus fire. Do not let him reach us." A storm of plasma and railgun fire rained down, but Reeve never slowed. His shields collapsed, alarms screamed, warning lights flashed red across his console. He ignored them all. He was almost there. Just a little further. His ship shook violently as another blast tore through the hull. Systems failed one by one. Weapons offline. Engines dying. Time running out. But he still had one last move. He set the reactor to overload. The Dominion officers barely had time to understand what was happening. The human ship, broken and burning, was still coming. Too fast. Too close. Vorkal took a step back, realization dawning too late. No, Reeve smiled. For Earth. The explosion ripped through space like a newborn star. The Dominion flagship didn't just explode, it ceased to exist. The shockwave swallowed everything in its path, sending the last enemy ships tumbling into the void, and then silence.no movement. No signals. Just the fading embers of a battle that should have been impossible. For minutes, there was nothing. Then, across the Dominion's emergency channels, a single, garbled transmission broke through the static. A terrified voice. A warning to the entire galaxy. The human, he was alone. And he still won. The last human was gone. But the fight was far from over. The universe had thought humanity was extinct. Now, they would remember. Because legends don't die. They become something greater. The laboratory was silent except for the steady hum of machines and the occasional beeping of monitors. Cold, metallic walls surrounded the central chamber, where a single figure sat restrained in a reinforced chair. Thick, steel cuffs bound his wrists and ankles, glowing with a faint blue energy designed to hold even the strongest creatures in the galaxy. But the creature sitting there was not an alien. He was human. His name was Sergeant Alex Carter, and he was the subject of an experiment that should have never happened. Dr. Vesh, the lead scientist, observed from behind the reinforced glass, his four eyes scanning the readings on the monitors. The subject's heart rate was steady, his brain activity normal, yet something felt wrong. The human had been captured during a border conflict, and the Dominion had seen a rare opportunity. Humans were known for their resilience, but no species was unbreakable. If they could understand what made them so durable, they could replicate it, control it, and use it. "Increase the serum dosage," Vesh ordered. His assistants hesitated before obeying, injecting a glowing green liquid into Carter's veins. The substance was meant to enhance pain, weaken resistance, and break the subject's will. It had worked on every species before. But as the fluid spread through his bloodstream, something unexpected happened. Carter exhaled slowly, his fingers twitching slightly, but his expression remained calm. Strange, one of the scientists muttered. He should be screaming by now. Vesh frowned, stepping closer to the glass. Increase the neural shocks. Electricity surged through Carter's body. His muscles tensed, his jaw clenched, but he didn't scream. He didn't even groan. Instead, he opened his eyes, and for the first time, he looked at them. Not with fear, not with pain, but with amusement. The assistants shifted uncomfortably. Something wasn't right. No creature endured this without breaking. No creature remained this calm. The experiment was supposed to test the limits of human endurance, but now it felt like something else entirely, like he was testing them. Fascinating, Vesh whispered. Increase to maximum. The room was filled with a violent hum as the machines pushed past their normal limits. Carter's body convulsed under the force, his skin glistening with sweat, veins bulging against his flesh. The scientists leaned in, expecting him to finally break, finally scream, but he started laughing. The sound sent a chill through the room. It wasn't the laugh of someone losing his mind. It was controlled, steady, predatory, like he was enjoying this. Vesh took an unconscious step back. Shut it down, he ordered. Now. A strange static noise filled the speakers, and then an explosion of sparks burst from the control panel. The restraints around Carter's wrists and ankles released with a metallic snap. The chair groaned as he stood up, rolling his shoulders like a man who had just woken from a nap. The scientists froze. The glass separating them was reinforced, designed to withstand high-impact forces. But Carter didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, placed his palm against the glass, and pressed. Cracks spread instantly, thick spiderweb fractures crawling across the surface. The reinforced material meant to hold creatures far stronger than humans shattered like cheap plastic. Panic erupted in the lab. Scientists scrambled, alarms blared, red emergency lights flashing as guards rushed inside with weapons drawn. Restrain the subject, one of them barked. Carter tilted his head, cracking his neck with an audible pop. Then he moved to the scientists. It was impossible. No creature should have been that fast. He reached the first guard before the alien could react, grabbing the weapon and twisting it with inhuman strength. Bones snapped. The rifle clattered to the floor. Carter stepped past the falling body, driving an elbow into the second guard's throat. The alien choked, collapsing to the ground. The remaining soldiers opened fire. Blue energy blasts streaked through the air, but Carter was already moving. He weaved through the attacks, dodging with unnatural precision, closing the distance before they could adjust. He grabbed another guard by the arm and used his own momentum to flip him over, slamming him into the floor hard enough to crack it. The final two turned to run. Carter didn't let them. Vesh stood frozen, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. This wasn't just endurance. This wasn't just resilience. The experiment hadn't weakened the human. It had done something else that had made him stronger. Carter turned to him, blood splattered across his face, a slow smile spreading. "You wanted to test a human?" he said, voice calm. "Now it's my turn." Vesh stumbled backward, his heart hammering in his chest. He pressed a button on his wrist communicator. "Security, we have a breach. Send the enforcers." Carter grabbed him by the throat, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. Vesh gasped, struggling, his four eyes wide with terror. He had spent years studying human physiology, analyzing their weaknesses. He thought he had understood them. He hadn't understood anything. Carter leaned in, his voice a whisper. "You made a mistake." His grip tightened. "You thought you were in control." The lights flickered again. A distant explosion shook the facility. The sound of more soldiers approaching echoed down the halls. Carter dropped Vesh to the floor and turned toward the door, his silhouette outlined by the red glow of the alarms. He picked up a fallen weapon, testing its weight. Vesh coughed, gasping for air as he watched the human walk away. "What? What are you?" he managed to whisper. Carter didn't turn back. "You tried to break a Death Worlder." He checked the rifle's power settings, then smirked. "Now you get to see what happens when one fights back." The last thing Vesh saw before Carter vanished into the corridor was the shattered remains of his experiment, his broken lab, his fallen guards, the wreckage of everything he had built. And for the first time in his life, he truly felt fear. Because the experiment hadn't just failed, IT had unleashed something unstoppable. The Dominion had fought hundreds of wars across the galaxy. They had crushed empires, burned civilizations, and erased entire species. To them, war was nothing more than a routine exercise, a process of domination and extermination. So when they set their sights on Earth, they expected the same result. They studied the humans, their primitive weapons, their divided nations, their short lifespans. The Dominion strategists laughed at the idea of humans putting up a fight. It would be easy. A swift invasion, a few orbital bombardments, and the planet would fall. Another species conquered. Another war won. They had no idea what they had just started. The first wave of the invasion went exactly as planned. Dominion warships entered Earth's orbit, unleashing fire upon its cities. Explosions painted the sky red, and clouds of smoke rose from burning ruins. They watched as humans screamed and ran, their armies scrambling to respond. The Dominion expected surrender. They expected fear. What they got was something else entirely. The moment the Dominion landed, the real war began. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not rely on centralized command. When their cities burned, they did not kneel. They adapted. They learned. They became something worse than an army. They became a swarm. Every street, every building, every ruin became a battlefield. The Dominion soldiers were used to order, to predictable tactics. The humans gave them chaos. They struck from the shadows, disappearing before the enemy could react. They used the ruins of their own cities as weapons. They poisoned supplies, sabotaged vehicles, and turned the very land against the invaders. And when the Dominion struck back with overwhelming force, expecting the humans to finally break, they discovered something terrifying. Humans did not break. They got angrier. The Dominion's commanders grew frustrated. Their enemies refused to fight a proper war. There were no grand armies waiting to be crushed, no single leader to assassinate. The humans did not fight for land or power. They fought for something far worse, for revenge. Every fallen human became a martyr. Every destroyed city became a reason to fight harder. And when the Dominion forces managed to kill a human resistance fighter, they learned another horrifying truth. Humans did not fear death. A Dominion officer once captured a wounded human soldier and, out of curiosity, asked him, "Why do you fight? You have already lost." The human, bleeding and dying, had smiled. "Because we are not fighting to win. We are fighting to make sure you lose." That was when the fear started. Weeks passed. Then months. The Dominion's easy war turned into a nightmare. Supply lines were cut. Ships were shot down by stolen weapons. Entire platoons vanished overnight. Desperation spread through their ranks. Soldiers refused to patrol alone. Officers slept with their weapons drawn. Every shadow, every silence, every abandoned street filled them with dread, because they knew the humans were there. Watching. Waiting. It was supposed to be the turning point, the end of the resistance. Instead, it became the worst defeat in Dominion history. As the fleet entered orbit, an unexpected signal echoed across their communication channel. A single message, repeated over and over in their language. "Welcome to hell." And then Earth's defenses, believed to be destroyed, came back online. A barrage of missiles and railgun fire tore through the Dominion fleet. Ships exploded in the skies, debris raining down like falling stars. The Dominion forces on the ground looked up, watching in horror as their reinforcements were annihilated. It was then that they understood. The humans had never been trying to win the war outright. They had been waiting, preparing, setting a trap so perfect that by the time the Dominion realized it, there was no way out. The invasion force, once so confident, now found itself stranded on a hostile planet, surrounded by an enemy that never slept, never surrendered, and never stopped coming. The Dominion's leadership, watching from their homeworld, finally gave the order. Retreat, but there was no escape. The moment the Dominion soldiers tried to flee, the humans struck harder than ever. They hunted them down, one by one, not just to win, but to make them remember. By the time the last Dominion soldier fell, Earth was in ruins. Cities were gone, nations had crumbled, but the humans were still standing. Broken, bleeding, but victorious. The Dominion, once the most feared force in the galaxy, had been defeated by the very species they had underestimated. Word of Earth's victory spread. Other species, long oppressed by the Dominion, began to rise up. The balance of power in the galaxy shifted. And at the heart of it all, one truth remained. The war had never been easy. It had been a warning. Humanity was not to be conquered. Humanity was to be feared. The battlefield was quiet. Too quiet. Smoke curled through the ruins, rising from shattered buildings and burned-out vehicles. Alien bodies littered the ground, twisted in unnatural angles, their armor torn apart by gunfire and explosives. The Dominion had expected this fight to be over hours ago. The human forces were outnumbered, outgunned, and cut off from reinforcements. There was no way they could still be fighting. And yet, they were. General Exalnoth stood at the edge of the wreckage, his dark eyes scanning the ruins ahead. His troops were afraid, whispering among themselves, gripping their weapons tighter than before. They had faced human soldiers before, but this was different. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was a hunt. And somehow, they were the ones being hunted. "Report," he growled into his communicator. A voice crackled through the static. "Commander Ralvik's unit is gone. We lost contact 20 minutes ago." Zalnoth's grip on his plasma rifle tightened. That was impossible. Ralvik's squad had 20 heavily armed soldiers. The humans couldn't have wiped them out so quickly. Unless it was still alive. The one they'd been trying to kill since this battle began. The soldier who wouldn't die. Zalnoth had seen him himself, just hours ago, bleeding, broken, and surrounded. The human should have been dead. His armor had been shattered, his helmet torn away, revealing a face covered in blood and dirt. But instead of falling, he had smiled. And then he had charged. Zalnoth's forces had shot him again and again, plasma burning into his flesh. He had collapsed, motionless, and they had left him for dead. Now, his men were disappearing. One by one. A sharp scream echoed from the ruins. Zalnoth spun, his weapon raised. Silence followed. He gestured for his remaining troops to advance, but they hesitated. Their fear was growing, and he could feel it. "This is one human," he snarled. One. Kill him, and this battle is over." The Dominion soldiers pressed forward, sweeping the area, their weapons glowing in the dim light. A shadow moved in the distance, slipping between broken walls. A shot rang out. A Dominion soldier dropped, a hole burned clean through his helmet. The others panicked, firing wildly into the darkness. They hit nothing. A whisper passed through the soldiers. "He's still here." Then the nightmare began. A knife slashed through the air, catching a Dominion trooper in the throat. Another soldier screamed as he was yanked into the shadows, his rifle clattering to the ground. Plasma blasts lit up the ruins, but they were shooting at ghosts. The human was too fast, too relentless. Zalnoth turned, just in time to see a figure emerge from the smoke. It was him. His armor was ruined, cracked open like a shell. His left arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Blood dripped from a gash on his forehead, running down his face like war paint. He should not have been standing. He should not have been alive. But he was, and he was smiling. Zalnoth fired. The plasma shot slammed into the human shoulder, sending him stumbling back. But then he kept moving. Faster. Zalnoth fired again. This time, the human dodged. Before the general could react, the soldier was on him. A fist crashed into Zalnoth's jaw, sending him sprawling. He scrambled for his weapon, but a boot crushed his wrist, pinning him down. The human stood over him, breathing hard, his eyes burning with something Zalnoth had never seen before. Not rage. Not hatred, purpose. Zalnoth coughed, blood filling his mouth. "What are you?" he gasped. The human knelt, his voice low, steady. "The last thing you'll ever see." A sharp pain exploded in Xalnoth's chest as the human drove a knife straight into his heart. Darkness swallowed him. The Dominion forces never recovered. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found only silence. Their army had been wiped out. The city was still standing. And the human soldier? Gone. Some say he died in that final battle. Others whisper that he walked away, still fighting somewhere in the shadows, waiting for the next war. The Dominion never dared attack Earth again, because they had learned a terrifying truth that you could kill a human soldier. But some of them refused to die.